Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I was the middle child of three girls. My older sister is 35 now, and my younger sister just turned 27. We had what I thought was a pretty normal family life until my dad got sick. He passed away 3 months ago, and while we're all still grieving, the practical matters of his estate have brought out some ugly sides of my family that I never expected to see. The backstory here is important, so bear with me. When my older sister turned 17, my parents bought her a car and paid for all her driving lessons. It was a nice little used car, nothing fancy, but it was hers. At the time, my dad had a good job and money wasn't tight. They made a big deal about it being her 17th birthday present, and honestly, I was excited because I figured I'd get the same treatment when I turned 17. Well, life had other plans. By the time I hit 17, my dad had lost his job and my mom was working part-time to help care for my grandmother who was sick. Money was incredibly tight, and there was no way they could afford driving lessons and a car for me. I understood at the time, I really did. I wasn't going to throw a tantrum about something my parents couldn't afford. So instead of learning to drive, I focused on my studies and got into a good university. After graduation, I moved abroad for work for a few years, and when I came back to the UK, I ended up living in London, where public transport is actually pretty great. I never really needed a car, so driving just wasn't a priority. My younger sister, on the other hand, started learning to drive last year. By then, Dad had gotten back on his feet financially, and he was in a position to help her out. He paid for her lessons and gave her money toward buying her first car, about £3,000 total. When I found out, I mentioned to Dad that I still hadn't learned to drive, and he promised me that when I was ready to start lessons and buy a car, he'd give me the same amount he'd given my sisters. I was planning to start lessons this year actually. My boyfriend and I have been talking about having kids in the next 5 years, and I figured it would be good to be able to drive when we have little ones. But then Dad got sick, and everything else took a backseat. After Dad passed away, we discovered that his estate was more substantial than we'd expected. Nothing crazy, but enough that my sisters and I would each inherit a decent amount. That's when I brought up the car money with my mum. My mum told me I should talk to my sisters about this since they both got help with their cars, and Dad had promised me the same. I said I felt weird bringing it up right after Dad's funeral, but Mum insisted that Dad would have wanted me to have that money. She reminded me that he felt bad that I missed out when I was 17, so I decided to have the conversation. I thought it would be straightforward. Dad had promised me the money, my sisters knew about the promise, and it seemed fair that I should get it from the estate. I brought it up when we were all at Mum's house going through some of Dad's things. I explained to them about how Dad had given my younger sister money for her car last year, and how he'd given my older sister her car when she turned 17. I told them Dad had promised me the same amount when I was ready to learn to drive, and since I was planning to start lessons soon, I thought that money should come out of the estate. My younger sister looked at me like I'd grown a second head. She asked if I was serious and accused me of trying to grab extra money just 3 months after Dad's death. I tried to explain that it wasn't extra money but money he had promised me. I pointed out that they had both gotten help with their cars while I hadn't received anything. My older sister jumped in and said it wasn't their fault that I had waited until I was 30 to learn to drive. She reminded me that she got her car when she was 17, 13 years ago, and told me I couldn't just make claims about money I thought I was owed. I tried to explain that Dad had literally promised me this money because he felt bad that I missed out when I was 17 due to our family's financial situation back then. My younger sister shot back that it wasn't their fault that Dad died before I got around to learning to drive. She said I couldn't claim money from his estate based on some conversation I'd had with him. The conversation was getting heated, but I tried to stay calm. I told them this wasn't about fault, but about fairness. I explained that they had both received financial help for their cars while I hadn't, and Dad had wanted to make that right. My older sister called the whole thing ridiculous. She said she had learned to drive at 17 like a normal person, and accused me of wanting to be compensated for my poor planning after choosing to wait 13 years. I got frustrated and explained that it wasn't poor planning. I reminded them that I was 17 when our family couldn't afford driving lessons. Then I was in university, then I lived abroad. Then I lived in London where I didn't need a car. I told them it wasn't poor planning, but life circumstances. My older sister dismissed my explanation and said I wasn't getting extra money from Dad's estate just because I had finally decided I wanted to learn to drive. I raised my voice a bit and insisted it wasn't extra money but the same money Dad had given both of them. That's when my older sister really lost it. She called me greedy and manipulative and said all I could think about was money just 3 months after Dad's death. She told me I should be ashamed of myself. She walked out after that, slamming the door so hard that Mum's china cabinet rattled. My younger sister just sat there shaking her head at me and said she couldn't believe I was doing this to our family. I tried to explain again that I wasn't doing anything to the family, just asking for the same treatment they had both received. My younger sister told me I wasn't getting the money because Dad was gone and I couldn't prove he had promised me anything. Actually, I could prove it, because it turns out Dad was more organized than any of us realized. When we were going through his papers the following week, I found a notebook where he kept track of financial gifts he'd given us over the years. And right there, in his handwriting, was a note that said, "Still owe middle daughter car money, £3,000, when she's ready to learn." I took a photo of that page and sent it to both my sisters. The response was immediate. My younger sister texted back that this didn't change anything because he was dead now. My older sister actually accused me of writing the note myself. That accusation stung more than anything else they'd said. I called them both immediately and asked if they were seriously accusing me of forging Dad's handwriting in his personal notebook. My older sister said she wouldn't put it past me at that point. I told them fine, we would let the estate lawyer sort it out, and that Dad's written promise should be enough to establish that this money was owed to me. And that's exactly what happened. The lawyer confirmed that Dad's written note constituted a debt of the estate, and the £3,000 was deducted from the total before the inheritance was split between us. Technically, my sisters each lost £1,000 from their inheritance to cover the money that should have gone to me anyway. My older sister sent me one final text message after the lawyer's decision, saying she hoped that money was worth destroying our family over. I haven't spoken to either of my sisters since. Mum says they'll come around eventually, but I'm not so sure. The thing is, I don't even feel guilty about it anymore. They showed me exactly who they are when they thought they could take advantage of me, and Dad's written promise proved that I was right all along. I start driving lessons next month. I'd been going there almost daily for 3 weeks, always picking whatever computer was available. There's no reservation system or anything like that. It's just first come, first serve, which makes sense for a public facility. So a few days ago, I walked in around 10 a.m. with my usual coffee and a folder full of project notes. The morning crowd was pretty light, maybe 6 or 7 people scattered around the computer area. I spotted an open terminal near the window and settled in. The natural light was nice, and I could see the street below, which helped me feel less cooped up. I logged into my email, opened up the design software I needed, and started reviewing feedback from a client about their logo redesign. Maybe 10 minutes in, I noticed someone standing behind me. Then I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around to see a woman in her 40s with blonde hair. Next to her stood a teenage girl, probably 16 or 17, looking embarrassed and staring at her phone. Karen asked me how long I was going to be using the computer. I told her I'd probably be there a while since I had just started, and pointed out that there were several other computers available nearby. She looked at the other computers and made a disgusted face, like I'd suggested something unreasonable. Then she told me that her daughter liked this computer and always used this one, so couldn't I just move to a different spot? I was genuinely confused by her request. I explained that I had already logged in and started my work, and reminded her that the computers were first come, first serve. Karen then argued that since I was an adult, I could work anywhere, but her daughter was just a child. I almost laughed out loud since her child was taller than me and probably had a driver's license. I told her again that her daughter looked capable of using a different computer and I wasn't going to move. Karen complained about how inconvenient this was for them. I pointed out that it would be just as inconvenient for me to pack up all my work when I was there first. I suggested that if she had an issue with the library's policies, she should speak to a librarian about it. Most reasonable people would have just picked another computer at that point, but Karen wasn't most people. She walked off with her embarrassed daughter following behind. I went back to my work thinking that was over. 5 minutes later, Karen returned with a librarian in tow. The librarian was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. The librarian asked if everything was all right. I explained that the woman had asked me to give up my computer for her daughter, and I had refused since I got there first and was working on a deadline. The librarian turned to Karen and delivered the perfect response. She told Karen that this wasn't a restaurant where you get to request your favorite table. Karen's mouth dropped open. She sputtered about being a taxpayer and said her daughter had been coming there for years, asking if there was some kind of seniority system or regular user preference. The librarian explained that all computers were available to patrons on a first-come, first-served basis and pointed out that several other identical terminals were available right then. Karen insisted that those weren't the one her daughter liked. The librarian noted that all the computers were the same model with identical software and internet access, and her daughter was welcome to use any available terminal. Finally, the teenage daughter spoke up in a quiet voice. She begged her mother to just use a different computer because the whole situation was embarrassing. Karen shot her daughter a sharp look and snapped that she was trying to make sure her daughter got what she needed. The daughter replied that she didn't need that specific computer, and any of them would work fine. The librarian nodded approvingly at the girl's reasonable response. The librarian said that settled the matter, then told Karen she needed to select from the available computers and keep her voice down since they were in a quiet zone. Karen agreed but complained about the customer service and threatened to speak to the supervisor. The librarian told her the supervisor's office was on the second floor if she wanted to make a complaint. Karen grabbed her purse and walked toward one of the other computers, just 3 seats down from me. It was literally identical to the one I was using. Same black monitor, same keyboard, same everything. The only difference was where it sat. When she pulled out the chair, she kept shooting me dirty looks and making loud sighing noises. Her daughter sat quietly beside her, typing away and pretending her mother didn't exist. About an hour later, I heard raised voices coming from the direction of the second floor. Apparently, Karen had indeed gone to complain to the supervisor. 20 minutes after that, she came back downstairs and packed up her things without saying a word, her daughter trailing behind looking relieved. Before I left, the librarian stopped by my computer. She apologized for the disruption and explained that some people think public spaces work differently than they actually do. I thanked her for backing up the library's own policies. She said that's what they were there for, then asked if she'd see me tomorrow. I told her absolutely, though I joked that I might try a different computer just to keep things interesting. She laughed and walked away. When I packed up my things, I wondered if Karen thought having a teenager somehow entitled her to special treatment at public facilities. The whole situation was so bizarre that I'm still processing it days later. 2 years ago, my husband lost his battle with cancer. It was a long, painful fight that drained our savings and left my 15-year-old daughter and me picking up the pieces. Before he passed, he gave our daughter a beautiful silver necklace with a small heart pendant that had her birthstone in the center. It wasn't expensive, maybe $50 at most, but it meant the world to her. She hasn't taken it off since the day he put it around her neck in his hospital bed. I work 2 jobs now to keep us afloat. During the day, I'm a receptionist at a dental office, and evenings I clean office buildings downtown. My daughter is pretty independent, but sometimes she comes with me to the office building when she doesn't want to be home alone. She'll do her homework in the lobby, while I work upstairs. This evening she was sitting in the fancy marble lobby of this high-end business building, headphones on, working on her math homework. The building houses several law firms and financial companies, so you get a lot of well-dressed, important-looking people coming and going. Most ignore us completely, which is fine by me. I was emptying trash cans on the third floor when I heard shouting from the lobby. My heart dropped because I knew my daughter was down there alone. I rushed to the elevator, and when the doors opened, I saw something that made my blood boil. This woman, in an expensive suit, was standing over my daughter, who was on the floor looking terrified. The woman had her hand wrapped around my daughter's necklace chain. The woman was accusing my daughter of stealing the necklace, claiming that no child from our background could afford something so nice. My daughter was pleading with her, explaining that her dad had given it to her before he died, but the woman wouldn't listen. She called my daughter a liar and threatened to call security. I stepped out of the elevator trying to keep my voice calm. I asked what was going on, and the woman turned to me with this smug look on her face. She told me my daughter had stolen the necklace and insisted she could tell quality jewelry when she saw it. She claimed there was no way people like us could afford something like that. I explained that the necklace had belonged to my late husband and that he'd given it to our daughter before he passed away. The woman refused to believe me and said it looked exactly like a necklace her grandmother had left her. She accused my daughter of breaking into her car or office to steal it. I could see my daughter's eyes filling with tears. She was clutching the necklace protectively while trying to tell the woman through her tears that she had tried to explain it was hers. The woman announced that security would sort everything out and that she wasn't going to let some street rat walk away with stolen jewelry. That's when she did it. She grabbed the chain with both hands and yanked it hard, trying to break it off my daughter's neck. The force sent my daughter tumbling backward onto the marble floor. I heard her head hit the ground with a sickening thud. Something inside me snapped. This woman had just physically assaulted my child over a necklace that meant everything to us. Before I could think about it, I was moving. I grabbed the woman by the shoulders and spun her around to face me. I told her she had just assaulted my daughter, but she insisted my daughter was a thief and that she was just retrieving her property. I explained that the necklace had been around my daughter's neck every day for 2 years and that I had photos, receipts, and everything to prove it. The woman said she didn't care what fake documents I had because she knew stolen goods when she saw them. She tried to turn away from me, still clutching the necklace. That's when I lost it completely. I wasn't thinking about what might happen or getting in trouble. All I could think about was my daughter on the floor and this woman trying to steal the last gift from her father. I threw the first punch right into her left eye. She screamed and stumbled backward, but I wasn't done. The second punch caught her right eye before she could recover. She went down hard, finally letting go of the necklace. The woman was screaming that I was insane and threatening to call the police. I told her to go ahead and call them. I helped my daughter up and checked her head where she'd hit the floor. She was okay, just shaken up. I put the necklace back around her neck while the woman sat on the floor holding her face. By the time the police arrived, the woman was demanding I be arrested for assault. She had 2 beautiful black eyes forming and was making a huge scene about being attacked by a crazy person. The first officer started taking her statement, but I interrupted and told him I wanted to report an assault on my minor daughter and attempted theft. I pulled out my phone and showed them photos of my daughter wearing the necklace at Christmas, at her birthday, at her father's funeral. I had the receipt from when my husband bought it, still in my wallet because I keep everything important there. I even had a photo my husband had taken of himself putting it on her in the hospital. The officer looked at the photos, then asked the woman if she had physically grabbed the necklace from my daughter. She insisted my daughter was a thief and that she was just trying to get her property back. When the officer asked if she had any proof the necklace belonged to her, she started sputtering about how obvious it was and how people like us couldn't afford nice things. The more she talked, the worse she made her case. The security guard had been watching the whole thing on the cameras. He confirmed that the woman had grabbed my daughter first and that I only acted after she knocked my daughter to the ground. In the end, the woman was arrested for assault on a minor and attempted theft. I was questioned but not charged since the officer determined I was defending my child from an ongoing attack. When they put her in handcuffs, she was still screaming about how unfair it was and demanding to speak to someone in charge. The officer just shook his head and loaded her into the patrol car. My daughter and I went home that night and she held onto that necklace even tighter than usual. We never found out what happened to the woman in court, but I heard through the building security guard that she was banned from the property permanently. I'm not proud of resorting to violence, but I'm not sorry either. Nobody touches my daughter or tries to take away the last piece of her father she has left. That necklace isn't just jewelry to us, it's love, memory, and connection to someone we lost too soon. About a year ago, I started feeling burned out, and my doctor said I needed to find a way to decompress. That's when I discovered mountain biking. I fell in love with it immediately. There's something about being outdoors, feeling the wind, and just focusing on the trail ahead that clears my head completely. I saved up for months to buy my bike. It's not some super expensive model, but it's good quality and it's mine. I do all the maintenance myself, keep it clean, and honestly, it's become my most prized possession. Every weekend I head to this park about 20 minutes from my apartment. It has these great trails, and it's become my ritual, my way of resetting before another crazy week. So last Sunday, I was doing my usual thing. I've been riding for about an hour and decided to take a water break at this bench near the main trail. I parked my bike right next to me, put my headphones in, and was just enjoying the moment. The weather was perfect and I was feeling really good about the ride. That's when I noticed this kid hanging around my bike. He looked maybe 9 or 10 years old, and he wasn't touching it or anything, but he was standing way too close and just staring at it. You know that look kids get when they see something they really want? That was it. He was circling around it like he was planning something. A few minutes later, this guy walks up, clearly the kid's dad. He was probably in his early 40s, wearing those athletic shorts that cost more than my weekly groceries, with sunglasses pushed back on his head. But the thing that really stood out was this wireless earpiece he had in his ear, like he was some kind of important business executive taking calls at a public park. He walks right up to me with this confident smile and asks if I would mind letting his son take my bike for a quick ride. I honestly thought he was joking at first. Like, who asks a complete stranger if their kid can borrow their bike? So I kind of laughed and told him I'd rather not. That's when everything changed. His whole expression shifted and he got this annoyed look on his face. He said it was just a quick loop and his kid wouldn't hurt it, and pointed out that I wasn't even using it right then. I stayed polite and told him that I was just taking a break and still needed it, and that I don't let anyone ride my bike. Now he's getting more frustrated, like I'm being completely unreasonable. He said his son was just a kid and told me not to be that person. His son, who was still hovering way too close to my bike, suddenly spoke up and promised he would give it back, like this was ever his to borrow in the first place. I repeated that it was my bike and I don't share it. That's when this guy really lost it. He threw his hands up and launched into this speech about how this is what's wrong with people nowadays. No community, no kindness. He kept emphasizing that it was just a bike, like that somehow made his request reasonable. I'd had enough at this point. I stood up and looked him straight in the eye. I told him that it was my bike, my property, and not his teaching moment for his kid. He threw his arms up in the air and started walking away, calling me a selfish little girl and complaining about how kids these days have no respect. He grabbed his son by the arm and started dragging him away. But the kid kept looking back at me like I had personally ruined his entire life. The look he gave me was intense, like I had just canceled Christmas or something. I sat back down, still kinda shocked by the whole interaction. That's when this woman walking her dog nearby came over. She'd clearly seen the whole thing and told me I had handled it better than she would have. She gave me a thumbs up and kept walking, but it made me feel better that someone else thought I wasn't being crazy. About 15 minutes later, I see the dad and his kid again. They're at the bike rental station near the parking lot and I can hear them from where I'm sitting. The rental place wanted $40 to rent a bike for an hour, and this guy was losing his mind about it. He was yelling about how $40 was ridiculous for just a bike. The rental guy tried to explain that it was their standard rate and that insurance, maintenance, and liability all added up to that cost. But the dad kept shouting that it was highway robbery and that this was why people don't share anymore. The irony was beautiful. Here was this guy who had just lectured me about community and kindness, but he wasn't willing to pay a fair price for his service. His kid was tugging on his sleeve, clearly embarrassed, and other people were starting to stare. He announced loudly that they would go somewhere else and walked off with his son. When they walked past my bench again, the dad made sure to give me one more dirty look, but his kid surprised me. Instead of giving me another dirty look, he actually looked kind of ashamed and quietly apologized for his dad's behavior. That honestly made me feel a little bad for him. It's not his fault his dad acts like the world owes him something. I finished my water, got back on my bike, and had an amazing rest of my ride. But I kept thinking about the whole situation. The entitlement was just incredible. This complete stranger thought I should hand over my personal property to his child just because he asked. And when I politely declined, suddenly I was a problem with society. I'm not sorry for saying no, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. My bike, my rules. I've been part of social justice movement since college, but nothing prepared me for the intensity of the Black Lives Matter protests during the summer of 2020. The whole country felt like it was on fire, and I knew I had to do something more than just post on social media. My family has always been tight-knit and politically active. When the protests started gaining momentum in our city, it was natural that we'd all want to participate together. There were 5 of us planning to go: me, my 2 siblings, and my 2 brothers-in-law. We're all in our 20s and 30s, and we've been to plenty of rallies and marches before, but this felt different, more urgent, more dangerous. The youngest in our group is my sibling, who had just turned 18. They're non-binary and barely 5 feet tall, but they have more courage and conviction than most people twice their age. They were the one who suggested we bring medical supplies to help injured protesters. We spent the night before the protest putting together backpacks filled with gauze, antiseptic wipes, bottled water, and basic first aid supplies. We also prepared for the worst. The news was full of stories about police using tear gas and rubber bullets on peaceful protesters. We bought construction goggles from the local hardware store. Nothing fancy, just basic safety equipment to protect our eyes. To make sure people knew we had medical supplies, we used duct tape to create red crosses on our backpacks. It seemed like the right thing to do. The day of the protest was intense from the moment we arrived. There were hundreds of people there, all ages, all backgrounds, united in demanding justice. The energy was electric, but you could feel the tension too. Police were everywhere, and everyone knew things could turn violent at any moment. We stayed for hours, handing out water to people who looked dehydrated and treating minor injuries when protesters got pushed around or fell. The sun was beating down and our supplies were running low. By late afternoon, we decided it was time to head home. We were walking back to our cars, maybe 2 blocks away from where the main crowd was gathered. My sibling was walking a bit ahead of us, probably eager to get out of the heat. That's when this guy appeared out of nowhere. He was big, probably in his mid-30s, well over 6 feet tall, and built like he spent a lot of time at the gym. He stepped right into my sibling's path and got in their face, towering over them in the most intimidating way possible. Karen, because that's what I'm calling this entitled piece of work, started yelling at them about their goggles and the medical cross on their backpack. He claimed they were wearing military equipment and violating some kind of military code. He said they should be arrested under martial law. My siblings stepped back looking confused and scared. They tried to explain that the goggles were just safety equipment from a hardware store and that they had medical supplies to help people. But Karen wouldn't listen to any of it. He kept getting closer to them, using his huge size to try to intimidate them even more. My sibling looked terrified and kept backing away from this lunatic who was screaming nonsense about military violations. That's when something inside me just snapped. I don't remember making a conscious decision to intervene. 1 second I was watching this unfold from 20 feet away, and the next second I was charging across the street like some kind of wild animal. I shoved myself between Karen and my sibling, getting right up in his face. Even though he had about 6 inches on me, I was so filled with rage that I felt 10 feet tall. I screamed at him to get away from my sibling right now. I started pushing him in the chest, hard enough that he had to take steps backward. I yelled about what was wrong with him, pointing out that he was trying to intimidate an 18-year-old kid. I told him to get out of there before I called the real police. Karen's whole demeanor changed instantly. This guy, who had felt so tough picking on someone half his size, suddenly looked like he'd seen a ghost. His face went completely white. He started stammering that he was just trying to explain something, but I cut him off. I kept yelling at him about being a bully. I pointed out that these were construction goggles from a regular store and basic first aid supplies. I demanded to know what he had been doing all day while we were helping injured people. I kept advancing on him, and he kept backing up. My siblings and brothers-in-law had caught up by then and were standing behind me, but I was still in full protective fury mode. I called him pathetic for thinking he could intimidate someone just because they were smaller than him. And then this 6-foot-plus grown man did something I'll never forget. He turned around and ran. Not walked quickly, not made an excuse and left. He literally turned and sprinted away down the street like his life depended on it. My whole family just stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then my youngest sibling started laughing and asked if that guy had really just run away from me. I said I thought he had. The adrenaline was still pumping through my system and my hands were shaking. I'd never felt rage like that before in my life. It was like every protective instinct I had just took over completely. One of my brothers-in-law said that watching me go off on that guy was the most terrifying thing he'd ever seen, and it wasn't even directed at him. We walked back to our cars together, and I kept looking over my shoulder to make sure Karen wasn't following us. But he was long gone, probably still running for all I knew. The more I thought about it afterward, the angrier I got. This guy saw a young person who looked vulnerable and thought he could intimidate them with some made-up nonsense about military code and martial law. He probably figured no one would stand up to him because of his size. But the second someone fought back, he completely fell apart. All that bravado disappeared the moment he realized he wasn't dealing with someone he could push around. It just goes to show that bullies are usually cowards at heart. My boyfriend loves telling this story to people. He says he's never found me more attractive than in that moment when I went full protective big sister mode. I'm not usually a confrontational person, but something about seeing someone try to intimidate my family just brought out a side of me I didn't know existed. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.